We now move into our next panel discussion titled Disruptive Trends in BFSI. Please join me in welcoming on stage our first panelist, Mr. Robert Healey, Senior Director, Marketing, APAC, Tenable. Mr. Robert Healey has over 20 years of senior management experience in marketing, product management, and business development in high-growth, $0 to $1 billion plus companies. Working in a variety of technical sales and marketing roles for service providers and IT equipment vendors, he has gained solid and diverse experience in the design and deployment of many APAC region's largest and most innovative enterprise and service provider networks. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Robert Healey, our first panelist. We'll just take 2 minutes while we get the setup going. Our next panelist, please join me in welcoming on stage, Mr. Mohammed H Kafi, Senior Executive Vice President and Head of Operations, NCC Bank, Bangladesh. Both the change catalyst and visionary, Mr. Kafi has been playing a vital role in setting strategic direction, vision of the bank. Having worked almost 29 years in the UK and Bangladesh, with a view for setting service and operational excellence coupled with risk mitigation, he has been working in forming and shaping the operations of NCC Bank with a special focus on digital presence. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelist, Mr. Mohammed H Kafi. Please join me in welcoming on stage Mr. Krishnenjit Roy, Vice President Technology, bankbazaar.com. He has 20 years of experience in application design development, production support, infrastructure design, implementing large networks and system architecture for various applications with enterprise security management. Proficient in scheduling projects to deliver maximum ROI within the shortest time by increasing offshoring and productivity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Mr. Krishnenjit Roy. Put your hands together and welcome on stage our fourth panelist, Mr. Gauri Prosad Sarma, OSD IT and Amalgamation, United Bank of India. Mr. Sarma is currently serving as the OSD IT and Amalgamation at United Bank of India. Prior to this, he worked at United Bank of India in the capacity of General Manager. He has over 20 years of rich experience in the banking sector, specializing in IT, cybercrime, and fraud management. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gauri Prasad Sharma. And now, join me in welcoming our chairperson and moderator, Mr. A Chowdary, technopreneur, scientist, mentor, speaker, public policy advisor, student enthusiast, Chairman of Blockchain Committee at Bureau of Indian Standards, Government of India. Mr. Chowdary is a visionary in IT industry of India. He served as Special Chief Secretary of the Government in the Chief Minister's Office during 2014 to 19. His has been advising and assisting the government in bringing in investments, generating employment, and encouraging innovation and startup activities in Andhra Pradesh. Mr. Chowdary is the chairman of Blockchain Committee at Bureau of Indian Standards, Government of India, and the founder of Hyderabad FinTech Forum. He was also the founder of FinTech Valley, Vizag. Ladies and gentlemen, our chairperson and moderator, Mr. A Chowdary. Sir, I now hand the session over to you.
Good afternoon. We have a very powerful panel who are going to discuss on the disruptions in the BFSI sector. Before I ask them to talk about their individual organizations, what they're doing and how they feel these disruptions are going to be very important at this point of time, I wanted to give some intro into my own experience with the fintech, in particular fintech sector and cybersecurity areas. Recently, actually, I visited a temple, Lord Balaji temple, not Tirupati Balaji temple, it's a local in Hyderabad. After darshan, I was just walking out of the temple. A lot of beggars used to be on both sides before I got into my car, and they were asking me to pay some whatever little money. When I looked at my purse, there was not even a rupee or this thing, everything is all credit cards. I can't give credit cards to them, obviously. So these days, because of the various digital technologies, internet banking, credit card, debit cards, I hardly have any cash in the purse. So I was feeling very bad. I was still walking. Then one beggar came to me, "Sir, do you have Google Pay? Can you pay in Google Pay?" I was stunned. A beggar telling me to pay in Google Pay. That is the kind of disruption which is happening at this point of time in India, particularly in the BFSI segment. The other incident recently, large number of CXOs from insurance segment, global CXOs, they all attended a big conference. In that, there was a roundtable session, how this insurtech or insurance industry is going to. They were all getting worried how they can survive, because they all felt that the startup companies who are coming in the insurtech area with their new technologies, emerging technologies, what they are using, they may take away a large portion of their business. Then how do these insurance companies will survive? That was the question mark they put to each other. I think the same kind of situation is happening for the banking segment. So banking segment is also very much worried. There are some bankers here, probably they will tell more about that. They are very much worried about how the new emerging, the bankers, like for example today Facebook announced they want to do banking, Google Pay is there. So telecom operators, technology companies, social networking companies, everybody is getting into bank. So that means they are also worried. In fact, I was reading a newspaper on interview from State Bank of India, the previous managing director. It's a big interview was there. He was telling that we are not a bank, we are a technology company. We have a bank license to operate the banking operation, and he describes why State Bank of India is a technology company. He says, because we have to deal with so much of data, we should know about data science. And also we have to do a lot of analytics on the data. So we should know the analytics aspect. And we have to automate. Robotic process automation is in thing in most of the banks. So that means we need to know artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that. Then once the bank is getting digitized, they are all worried about the security. So cyber security, obviously we should have a strong cyber security team. And the last one, what he said is, everybody is talking about blockchain technology in fintech. So obviously we have to look at what is blockchain, how it is relevant for the bank, particularly State Bank of India. So you tell me whether State Bank of India is a bank or a technology company. So that is a kind of a disruptions happening on one side. The digital companies are coming to the banking and insurance segment. The other side, conventional banks, they have to forcibly, banks or insurance companies, they have to get into the digital way of doing things. Otherwise, they may lose all their customers. So that is a kind of a disruptions is happening from the conventional bank's point of view. At the same time, if you look at the startup companies, in fact, one of our panel members is going to talk more about how the fintech startup companies, what are the opportunities and all that. Recently, I was reading the NASSCOM's report on India's startup scenario. In that report, they were telling, in just fintech alone, in the last 3 years, 3 times there is a increase in the startups in fintech. There were only around 700 fintechs about 3 years back. Today, they already crossed 2,000 fintechs, and many of them are getting into like Paytms and all that. This thing, they are already unicorns, billion-dollar companies. So, as per their projection, by 2023, the lot of companies, the technology companies, startup companies are going to provide a lot of solutions for the unbanked, underserved people in the rural areas and all that, and that segment is going to be much bigger than the regular startup community which is working in the health tech, agri tech and all that. So looks like the disruptions in the BFSI is going to throw a lot of opportunities for the startup companies. I was just listening to the discussion on the 5G just before our panel discussion. In fact, when we were having a lunch on with our panel members, with 4G itself, we are facing a lot of cybersecurity issues. And they were talking about more DDoS attacks when you got more bandwidth. The 5G provides a lot of good things, but also provides a lot of the security issues, particularly common point of view. A common villager, working in a village doing farming, suppose we introduce 5G phones, he goes to the market and buys without knowing how it is going to take away his money in the bank, how it's going to really control his data, health data or individual data or financial data. He doesn't know. With the existing smartphones itself, many people are getting cheated. So what is going to happen if 5G kind of infrastructure with a lot of bandwidth, a lot of DDoS attacks happening, even for a tech-savvy people with all the technology, this thing, even they themselves may have to worry about the cybersecurity issues. So these are the kind of threats, opportunities are there in these disruptions in the banking and insurance segment. So what I request my panelists, each panel member, I request them to talk about 2 or 3 minutes. Afterwards, we'll have the Q&A session. So since we believe Atithi Devo Bhava, that is guests are treated like God, the people who have come from other countries, so we request them to come. Maybe we'll start with our neighboring country, Muhammad from Bangladesh, to talk about it. Then afterwards, we'll request Roberts from Australia, then my colleagues from India. Please go on.
Good afternoon. I think it was, I just wrote down the name, Jamie Damian of Chase Bank, JP Morgan and Chase, and also Piyush Gupta of DBS, who also thought that, these banks are also IT companies, because they invested heavily on technology. My name is Mohammed Kafi. I look after operation, but as well as look after technology and how technology can help us, the bank, and also our customers in order for more engagement. Today, the biggest challenge for us is to stay connected with customers. As a bank, it is difficult to do so. Historically, we had customers coming to the branch, but as we said, we witnessed this morning's program when Duncan Waddell talked about the Generation Z. We see all these young generation people, they don't think that banks are important, and they tend to find mobile as the most friendly device. And this has forced us to look into those technology and business process, how we can leverage more from technology and to provide better service so that we can reduce churn and stay engaged. I personally think that, this disruption is not necessarily a disruption, it's an opportunity for us. I think we need to be more open with the fintech. We talked about, or people talk about API, so we talk about open API so that we can shake hands with all the players. I believe the way that things are happening, what we see even at home, the children is spending more time at home, but not talking to us. They are spending time with their mobile, always head down, and finding time to socialize in the social media. And they're really, really connected. You ask a question, they will not raise their head, but they will pass a comment and they'll give you the answer. and that answer is the correct answer. So they are very savvy in terms of knowledge and how to gather that knowledge. So I think as a bank and as someone who, who has crossed 50, this is a learning from us. We need to be aware of this transition, if you like, this what we call the disruptive trends in banking and financial industry. If you can provide the right kind of solution to customers, I think there is a pretty good chance that they will stay with us. Globally, what we see, even in Russia, there was a news clip that they're using virtual reality and putting these virtual reality glasses on top of the cows. They feel good about it and they give more milk. So think of the good side of technology. This is happening in Russia. On the other hand, there was this techie guy and he was passing a wrong message to North Korea saying that, you could use Bitcoin to avoid sanction, and he ended up in jail. So all these things, all these disruptions are happening. In the banking scenario, I think when we look at technology, we look at artificial intelligence because we get a lot of structured and unstructured data. This artificial intelligence is actually helping us in terms of translating AML, especially the transactions that are happening in AML. And that's a big worry for banks. So AI is being heavily used in the banking industry. I think it will continue to do so, especially on the risk areas. So I think with that, I will end my introduction. Thank you.
I request Robert.
I think I have my own mic. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here and allowing me to sit on this esteemed panel of very dignified gentlemen. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to come to India, and it's a really interesting time, both in the field of cybersecurity and in the field of finance. Much like many other industries all around the world, as well as here in India, we are seeing disruption or transformation of the finance industry. And that affects us all, from the traditional brick and mortar banks to the newer fintech type organizations, as well as vendors like Tenable, who are trying to sell into both environments. We must understand the changes that are occurring in the industry and be able to address that. So much like examples of Uber, or in India, Ola, and Airbnb, where we see now the biggest global players in fields like hospitality, they don't have any hotels. And the biggest taxi companies in the world do not own any cars. Right? We're seeing the same kind of transformation taking place in the finance industry too. And so the ability of the traditional banks to embrace the change that is occurring, and largely being driven by the younger, Generation Y, Millennial, Generation Z type people, and embrace and adapt to that, while still ensuring the best possible service. And particularly in finance, one of the most critical elements there is safety and security. We all work very hard to earn our money, and we want to make sure that it's safe, whether it's in my hands or in yours, or in some newer IT company environment, or on my mobile device, or somewhere in the cloud. Right? Security is critical. And so ensuring both that in the extreme case, the modern or the next generation bank is going to look like a mobile phone talking to something in the cloud. Right? And the physical interactions between people are going to become fewer and fewer. Right? So in an environment like that, we need to make sure that the systems themselves that are running these banking applications are safe. We need to ensure that the applications are safe, and we need to ensure that the devices are safe and authenticating the end users properly. If you forget, or if you lose, or if you have your mobile phone stolen somewhere, you don't want to lose your entire money. So security is absolutely critical in this regards. And the security, there's no silver bullet for security. It must be a continual, ongoing process, and ideally something simple yet repetitive, like brushing your teeth every day, right? Something simple that everybody is used to doing. You know, it's habitual, and you do it because, not because it's fun, but because the alternative is much worse, right? So, in that regards, I will.
Thank you, Robert. Now I request Mr. Gauri to talk about his experience in the banking industry.
Namaskar. As in course of the introduction, it has been announced that I was heading the IT department of United Bank of India for quite some time. But I have been given a new designation very recently. Besides being the OSD in IT as GM, I am also GM in charge of Amalgamation. So I would like to talk about the traditional things they have already covered, and Krishnenjit will also, Mr. Roy will also be covering. So I would like to draw the attention of the audience to another aspect. All of you are aware, post the declaration by Honorable FM on 30th of August, the Indian banking, 10 banks are going to become 4. A huge, because inside I can feel what the challenges are, what are the technological challenges that we are going to face, at the same time maintaining customer service uninterrupted. Present day banking is not only brick and mortar banking, both alternate delivery channels, internet banking, mobile banking, all digital banking channels are there. So keeping everything up and running 24/7, and at the same time ensuring a smooth, seamless migration. See, my bank is getting amalgamated with Punjab National Bank and also Oriental Bank of Commerce. These 3 banks are going to become the second largest public sector bank in India. So I know the job is massive one, challenges are very many. We'll do a fine job, but at the same time we have to ensure that nothing gets disrupted. So this is a unique thing, I think happening only once in the lifetime in the history of a bank, because merger do not happen like this. At least in our country, it has not happened like that. So a big challenge is coming up. Going forward, definitely I will go into the details.
Thank you, Gauri. Now I request Mr. Roy.
Hi, my name is Krishnenjit Roy and I represent Bank Bazaar. So Bank Bazaar is an online marketplace for all financial products. So basically if you are shopping for a loan or a credit card, you basically come to our site and we will offer you options from different banks, and then you can pick and choose based on your demographics, which particular bank you want to go with. And then, your entire transaction, entire fulfillment is taken care by us. So what I want to stress upon is that in today's era, especially in a country like India, which has close to 1.3, 1.4 billion people, it is impossible to kind of do transaction using the traditional way. Tech is the only way which will solve this problem or this challenges that people are facing. Because today nobody really wants to go to a bank and then fill in multiple papers, give your 6 months tax statement, give your passport copy, and then wait for hours and days to kind of get your transaction done. People want it fast. People want it in a digital paperless manner. People want to do it on the ease of sitting at their home using their mobile phone. So that is the disruption that companies like us has brought to this country. And I think it's a long way to go, and I think it's going to be much more interesting going forward.
Thank you. So we have about 19 minutes. So what we'll do is maybe we'll have a couple of questions each. Then if we have time, we'll have open house questions for a couple of more questions. So we'll start with Roberts. Roberts, I come from a village. In my village, few years back, most of the farmers, they were not having the banking accounts. most of the transactions used to be cash. They were very comfortable. Then when Government of India introduced a program called Jan Dhan program, most of the unbanked, the people who are not having the bank account, they got new bank accounts. On top of that, these days, the smart mobile penetration is more actually in the villages. So they started not only having a bank account, they were operating the smart mobiles, using the mobile banking, internet banking, all that. It's all fine. But the way things are happening, already we have seen many incidents where some of the farmers, they lost the entire money in the bank, whatever they have saved and all that, this thing. There's going to be a lot of hue and cry because today the police in India, I don't know in Australia, in your country, how they're equipped and trained. They're not able to deal with the local incidents, local law and order. And if you, pose any of this cyber-related this thing, they're not able. And also the most important thing is, these thieves are not in India. They are somewhere else in other countries. In that kind of situation, do you think, because you are a cyber security expert, do you think there is any solution to safeguard the interest of a common man?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Mr. Chowdary, for asking it in that way. In the field of cybersecurity, there's no one silver bullet, right? Keeping safe must be everybody's shared responsibility, from the service provider, the network provider, and the user of any service, right? Each of us own a mobile phone, and we don't just leave it lying around. You keep your important assets safe, whether it's physical, virtual, online, money or anything else. I keep a pretty close eye on my wife's jewelry. So in an era like this, the cyber criminals are constantly trying to find new ways to attack both the banks, the phones, the applications, and the users, right? So there's phishing and there's social engineering. There are card scanners and card readers, fake ATMs, and there's any number of online scams, right? So everybody needs to have a basic understanding in this era of how to stay safe online, right? But the banks and the fintech organizations who are providing these services, they also have a duty of care that they must take to make sure that their systems and their infrastructure, and more these days, the user data that they hold stays safe. In countries around Asia, there are laws about making this mandatory, and I'm sure India will follow suit.
Yeah, I have one follow-on question. Suppose in Australia, one farmer loses money because of cyber attacks. Do you have any insurance cover to cover those things?
Yeah, that is an emerging field, and more, the more forward-thinking insurance companies who are used to basically doing the same thing for the last 200 years, right? They are now having to also deal with the online world. And so cyber insurance is an emerging field in the banking and the finance insurance sector that is experiencing massive growth, right? And the problem is the insurance companies don't understand the environments, they don't understand the technology, and they're not used to operating at the speed of the newer cyber environments. So this is something that we all need to cooperate on, from security vendors, fintech companies, and traditional banks. We all need to work together to make sure that everybody is safe.
Thank you. Mr. Mohammed, you are working for a public sector bank in Bangladesh. What is the general ecosystem in the banking industry as well as the fintech industry in Bangladesh? My follow-on question to you is going to be, because a lot of youth, particularly with new millennials, how is their experience with the ongoing changes in the banking industry?
Thanks, Mr. Chowdary. Bangladesh has seen or witnessed generations of banks to emerge. So we talk about first generation bank, and the current trend is actually generation 5. And which all these new banks, I think the good thing about the new banks, they learn from what others have done in the industry locally or internationally. So the more recent kind of bank opening their service are the most tech savvy. Some of the old banks, the one that I represent, there is a mix of feelings. In some part, people feel that since we are a corporate bank, we issue letter of credit, and we predominantly have large loan to customers. We don't need to spend more money on technology. But however, the reality has suggested that we cannot but survive without the right technology, even for those customers. Why? Because the entrepreneurs who started those business, that business has gone to the second generation. So the young lads who basically went abroad, got the degree, and now they are actually managing the service or their enterprise, corporates. They don't want to visit the bank. And they keep saying, why can't I start the LC from my own office? Why don't you provide us internet banking or mobile app the way others have done? So they tend to portray what other services are available locally and internationally. The second one, what was it, Mr. Chaudhary?
The ecosystem, ecosystem and fintech.
The other part is happening is local fintech companies. They're not only working with us, the banks, they're actually working with the regulator, which is Bangladesh Bank. And I think that's a good part, because they're actually educating Bangladesh Bank and saying, you know what, early part, we have seen banks providing this kind of technology, but now, for example, in earlier part, we did not see anti-money laundering as part of the core banking when a bank wishes to purchase a core banking solution. So a lot in the mindset have changed. So people now tend to go for AML, asset liability management, core risk, which is very important. And within the risk, you have analytics, which uses the AI. So that helps the anti-money laundering as well. So these things are actually talked about, and the fintechs are actually partnering with central bank in Bangladesh, which I think is good for the industry. Because what tends to happen is we go to the board for funding, and the board says, well, if Bangladesh Bank or the regulator hasn't said it, we might as well do it later. So, but when the regulator says that, you know what, you have to do these things and you have to make sure, the recent one is that, the central bank has issued a guideline for all banks about the core banking, what are the modules and what are the processes that need to be in place. And based on that, what they're doing now is to go back to the bank saying, what are your preparedness? Have you done it, or how long it will take? And you have to do it by that day. So that kind of forces banks to partner with not only CBS vendors, but also fintech. Because in a lot of areas, the banks are actually spending money in terms of providing digital presence in the market and focusing on the young generation. And that's why, you have the element of security. We talk about AI for AML, but we also have AI for digital arena. What if I have a mobile solution and I want to add chatbot like Erica in Bank of America? How do I actually look into the security aspect? Because if I actually forget to do so, then what will happen? The chatbot's going to talk to each other, and that will create a really bad scenario for the bank. So I think, it's a lot of things are happening in the bank, and we anticipate that a lot more will come in future.
I have one follow-on question. See, in India, we recently created the fintech forums. So all the startups are part of the forum, and some of the bankers are also, even government officials are also part of the forum. I keep getting a lot of complaints from the startup community, particularly in the fintech area, that the regulators are not open, there are a lot of issues are there. And do you have a similar kind of thing that central bank in Bangladesh is very restrictive about certain regulations, or are they open for the open banking kind of thing? What is the scenario on that?
I need to make sure that there is no one from central bank here. This is something we, there are some areas where the regulator is very strict, if you like. Like when you talk about cloud, private cloud is okay, but public cloud is not allowed in Bangladesh. So I cannot have banking data in a public cloud scenario, the core banking area. I think there is an opportunity for banks to work on the digital platform like internet banking, where bank can have their shared data, if you like, in the open platform, but core banking data, customer data cannot be in the open cloud. So there is this restriction. But what is happening is actually the fintech, they are pushing the central bank, and the central bank has a lot of graduates who understand technology, and they're actually trying to influence their seniors, saying that, we have to do it. One of the good things we have in Bangladesh that we also have CTO forum. I myself is a member of it, and in CTO forum we tend to engage with the senior managers in central bank. We got called in the residence of governor, if you like, of central bank, and we being asked what are the things that you think we should do. So I think this open approach is actually helpful. Helpful for the industry and helpful for the customers as well.
Thank you. Gauri, now you are in a very challenging scenario.
Yeah.
One is as a regular conventional banker, now you are head of the IT. And particularly now when banks are going from conventional to digital, that's one issue. Now your banks are getting merged. Yes. Some 3 banks are getting merged, right?
Yeah.
So how are you handling all this? What are the challenges that you are facing in these mergers, particularly when they're going totally digital? On top of that, there are mergers. So each bank will have their own way of handling the IT infrastructure. So what kind of challenges you are facing there?
Thank you, sir. Very interesting question. As I mentioned right in the introductory remark, a massive change is going to happen. When these 10 banks in the country are getting reduced to 4 banks, and in our group, 3 banks are getting merged into one entity. As the job in hand is technological amalgamation, that will consume about 80% of the total job. So, because all banks are now on core banking and fully computerized. So there itself, although the government took care to announce the amalgamation process amongst banks having the same technology platform, even then there is a problem inside it. Say, take for instance my own bank. Very briefly I will mention that Punjab National Bank, which is the anchor bank in our case, they are on a higher version of Finacle. We use Finacle. They use the 10.x version, whereas United Bank of India and Oriental Bank of Commerce uses a lower version, that is 7.x. Now, the ideal scenario would have been to first migrate from 7.x to 10.x and then amalgamate. But that will take a long time. So we have to do it fast, and first we will be moving directly to 10.x, which is a challenge. Because a lot of, new things are there in the higher version. For that, the entire bank-wide data cleansing process will have to be undertaken. What we have done, this is a major challenge, is technological amalgamation number 1. So for that, we have taken measures. Altogether, we have constituted around 34 task force in the 3 banks. They are on the job to finalize how we will amalgamate. And thereafter, the major player is Infosys itself. They are the pillar in the whole thing. Because this will take some time. It cannot happen over 2-3 months' time. But the government will definitely announce by 1st of April, it is already in the news or in the open media, that 3 entities will become 1 or 10 will become 4. So 1st of April or 2nd of April, it is quite natural that a customer of bank X will go walk into bank Y, which are getting merged and demand service. So that will have to be provided, which we are thinking that this is one challenge.
Maybe I think we'll come back because there's only 4 minutes left.
Sir.
So because the most important thing which is happening today is the startup opportunities, which I request Mr. Roy to talk about since he's representing FinTech.
Sir.
Roy, can you since you have been in the FinTech startup for the last 5-6 years, how do you see big opportunities for India through the FinTech startups? What are those opportunities and also challenges? How do you see 3 years from now the Indian FinTech startup industry is going to emerge?
Yeah, so a fintech startup in India is in a very interesting situation because there are a lot of challenges in fintech also. Like, for example, there are regulatory challenges like Data Privacy Act, and now the law has also been passed, and there are multiple papers on it. So the way we are looking at things is, we are going with like a hybrid approach. We want to use the benefits of a public cloud. As well, we want to use private cloud wherever there is a data residency or a data compliance requirement. So people are now moving slowly towards Dockers, Kubernetes, that kind of a world. Because today I don't want to be held ransom by a single cloud provider in determining and being held ransom with their managed services. So I want to decide and control my data because obviously I'm holding a lot of data of the customer, and these are all PII data. So I have to be very careful. So I want to make sure that I have complete control over the data. So we are implementing a hybrid cloud kind of a scenario wherein the best practices of a public cloud, we are using that, as well as when data residency comes into picture, then we are using something like a internal private cloud, or even for that matter an internal data center. So that's one thing, and we're also investing a lot on robotic process automation. So that's another aspect that we are working on.
Thank you. We have got 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Maybe we can take a couple of questions from the audience. 2 questions probably, if there are any. Otherwise, we'll have some more questions I can ask our panel members. Is there any question from the audience? Looks like they are very satisfied with the explanation. So my last question to all of you, since India is also going like GDPR in Europe, the privacy enactment is taking place. I don't know in Bangladesh what is the scenario. What are the pros and cons once the parliament enacts the bill, the privacy bill? What are the pros and cons as far as the BFSI sector is concerned? Anybody can?
Maybe if I can address that first. Across multiple countries worldwide and within the Asia-Pacific region, governments are making things harder for people to operate. Nobody wants to be in the headlines for the wrong reasons, and banks, governments, insurance, healthcare providers do not want to have a data breach and have their customers' information leaked out into public. That's a risk to the business, a risk to the brand, and it will drive customers away. So the laws are there for the governments to enforce people paying attention to security and privacy. And I think that's a good thing for everybody.
If I may say this, I think with the GDPR in Europe, we saw a lot of banks and fintechs working together to ensure that the customer data is protected. In Bangladesh, we saw that the central bank saying that for e-commerce, one-time password is a mandatory. That has been working pretty nicely. I think that in a way protects consumer rights. So any government regulation, I think I see it very positively to protect the end users, because at times we also become victim of cyber attack. If I may, one of the things that it might actually help all of us, if I can ask this to Robert, is when all these regulations about our end user protection coming in, and we also understand that digitization, the paradox of digitization is all about, is it for us? Shall I? Okay. The paradox of digitization is not about technology, but it's the individualization, is the sort of personalization of customer that matters. And that's why we see ourselves, and especially our kids, they become so engaged with mobile because it's so personalized. Once that is the case, how does cyber security element can be protected, Robert?
I don't know whether can we take one more minute? Yep.
Oh,
All right, I'll speak really quickly. Look, cybersecurity, it's not a point-in-time thing. It must be a continuous process. The burden needs to be shared between the consumer, the service provider, and the bank, right? So making sure that I don't lose my device, making sure that I use suitable, strong authentication, making sure that the bank has secure applications and secure infrastructure, and that there's the appropriate regulatory environment to ensure that this environment isn't breached. I think it's a nationwide, it's a personal, it's an institutional, it's a shared responsibility.
Roy, I mean, do you see a lot of opportunities for the startup companies because of this enactment of the Data Privacy Act by the Parliament?
Absolutely, because today with the amount of data that is available, there are so many opportunities that it has in terms of any kind of data mining that can be done, any kind of data analytics that can be done, any personalization that it can be offered to you. So data is the key, and that's why machine learning and AI is becoming so important today. How to churn this data and how to get meaningful information out of it. So I think this has a huge opportunity for fintech companies, especially to use this data in order to kind of, provide solutions.
Thank you. I think I want to thank my fellow panelists for excellent interaction. And definitely these disruptions are going to throw a lot of challenges, and also more importantly for Indian startups, a lot of opportunities. I think they are going to create a lot of new jobs and new opportunities, and wealth creation also will happen. I think it's going to be a win-win-win for everybody. Thank you.